Welcome back to Canadian Justice, where we're discussing workplace romances and the liability associated with it. Now, Ron, what happens in a scenario where a workplace romance starts as, consensually, goes along fine, there's not a power imbalance, but the relationship falls apart, and then there's hostility between these colleagues and former lovers? Now, I cannot even imagine how awkward it would be to work with a recent ex. But so what kind of obligations are there on a workplace to separate feuding ex-partners?
Well, Christine, the Occupational Health and Safety Act provides really for two important things. One is providing a safe workplace that deals with this. And also Section 32 deals with violence and harassment in the workplace. So if there are allegations of sexual harassment, there must be, number one, a workplace investigation. Then number two, once that's done, there must be a report made to the complainant and the respondent on the result of the investigation. Of course, if the finding is substantiated, then there could be disciplining, there could be termination, or it could not have occurred. However, there could still be bullying or harassment, which could then create a toxic workplace, and that would have to be dealt with.
Now, Mackenzie, harassment is one of the consequences of a failed workplace relationship. It can be one of the consequences. It's obviously not always. So how common is that? How common is it to see claims of harassment, sexual or otherwise, arising out of a failed workplace romance?
I don't see this very often at all. While what I do see is a lot of sexual harassment cases. So those cases are almost always arising out of situations where it's clearly not consensual. It's not reciprocated. The sexual advantages are not reciprocated in the workplace. That's not to say that sexual harassment cannot result from workplace romances that have failed, but certainly the majority of sexual harassment cases, when it indeed comes to non-consensual, non-reciprocated sexual advances.
Ron, I hear all of this, and if I was an employer, I would think, oh my goodness, I do not want my employees dating each other. So what can workplaces actually prohibit that entirely? Can they say no one who works here is allowed to date each other?
Well, Christine, you can't outlaw romance. But what you can do is put a check and measure in place to protect a conflict of interest. And that should be a contractual term, because what if there is a conflict, a potential conflict, there's a romance, and then you decide to move one of the employees to a different role, maybe a different location, or a different reporting structure. Now, that can be considered constructive dismissal. So although you can't allow romance, you can put checks and measures in place. And that is really by having a policy defining what workplace romance is, which is tough to do. Mm-hmm. The problem is that perhaps one person may feel romantically involved and the other may think he's a nice guy or a nice lady. So there can be issues there, but really it depends on the circumstances as to what that employer can do. But certainly there are steps that they must take under the Occupational Health and Safety Act.
And Mackenzie, if the workplace does have a policy that says a superior cannot date a subordinate, a person who they directly report to, if they do it anyway, if a subordinate and a supervisor do start dating in secret and it's found out, what consequences can that lead to? Can they be fired for cause?
So breaching your employer's policy banning workplace relationships, it's very unlikely that would amount to just cause for your termination. That being said, your employer can terminate you for any reason, as long as it's not a human rights violation, as long as they provide you with proper severance. So here's a situation where perhaps you're in breach of a ban on a policy, a workplace policy, but your employer, the just cause to terminate you without any severance, it's such a high threshold. It's comparable to the capital punishment for employment law. And so whether your breach of your workplace relationship rises to the level of that, it's very, very unlikely. Less dramatic measures should have been taken before your company jumps to terminate you for cause.
Ron, about 30 seconds left. Anything you want to add to that?
Certainly. What if there's parties are married What if there's no policy?
Married
When
to
has to look at-
someone other than the person they're dating at work.
Exactly. When you're going to look at it, take the contextual approach. Even in Tory's case, did it impact his role as mayor? Yes or no? That would be the issue.
Right. We've got to go to break, but we will be right back.